Welcome to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. No politics, no drama, no arguing. Just two guys talking sports. I'm your host, JJ Peters. Today on the podcast, we'll discuss Week 16 NFL highlights, Padres acquire Blake Snell from the Rays, the Cubs trade Yu Darvish to San Diego, and much more. But first, we have a poll question. As always, you can vote on Instagram and Facebook at Sportstown_podcast or on Twitter at SportsTownPod. And the question was, is Josh Allen an MVP candidate right now? And currently, it's tied at 50. Again, thanks for voting. You can vote on Instagram and Facebook at Sportstown_podcast or on Twitter at SportsTownPod. Let's get an update in the sports world. Breaking news, the former first-round pick, Dwayne Haskins, has been released by the Washington football team. He has been fined twice with the league and recently was seen at a strip club with no mask on. Before Sunday's game versus the Panthers, the Ohio State product was stripped of his captain role with Washington and eventually was benched in favor of practice squad quarterback Tyler Heineke. Haskins struggled versus Carolina on Sunday as he had 3 turnovers, which led to his benching. Haskins has apologized and understands why he was let go by the team. Washington football team head coach Ron Rivera wishes Haskins the best and hope he learns from his mistakes. The 20-time Grand Slam champion Roger Federer will opt out of the 2021 Australian Open. He has been dealing with a knee issue ever since the 2020 year started and opted out of both the U.S. and French Open. Both of his trainers said to take more time off so he'll be ready for his next major and get his 21st Grand Slam. Federer is one of the greatest male tennis players of all time and is currently tied with Rafael Nadal for the most Grand Slam majors. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Australian Open was moved back to February 8th, a day after Super Bowl 55, and 6 days before the 2021 Daytona 500. Jared Goff is out versus the Cardinals with a thumb injury that led to his surgery. Goff injured his thumb Sunday in a loss versus the Seahawks that cost them the division. Goff popped his thumb back into place after being hit in the third quarter that caused his thumb to dislocate. The surgeon will be the same doctor that performed Drew Brees' surgery last year. John Wolford will start with his Cardinals, who are starting his first ever game in the NFL. Wolford played in the American Alliance Football League for the Arizona Hotshots and led the league in touchdown passes before it disbanded. The Rams also signed Blake Bortles, who was Goff's backup last year. Reigning NBA Rookie of the Year Ja Morant is out for at least 3 to 5 weeks with his high ankle sprain. Morant hobbled off the court in a win versus the Nets. The injury caused Morant to be carted off of a wheelchair. According to ESPN NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski, he reported that the X-ray came back negative. Morant currently is averaging 26 points per game, 6 assists per game, and a 54 shooting percentage. The Grizzlies already have to deal with injuries as 30-year Jaren Jackson is out with a torn meniscus. Memphis has a lot to deal with as the season moves forward. Hall of Fame pitcher Phil Niekroy has passed away at the age of 81, according to National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Niekroy passed away from a long battle with cancer. He played 24 seasons, mostly with the Braves. He also played for the Yankees, Indians, and Blue Jays. In fact, he played for the Braves 21 seasons, even when they were in Milwaukee. He was a 5-time All-Star, 5-time Golden Glove Award. He led the NL in 2 wins and had his number 35 for the Braves retired. The former All-Star was most famous for his knuckleball. Many consider him the greatest knuckleball pitcher of all time. Alabama wide receiver Devontae Smith has been selected as the AP College Football Player of the Year. He beat out teammate Mac Jones, Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence, and Florida quarterback Kyle Trask. He received 26 out of 49 first-place votes. Smith was famous for his winning touchdown against Georgia in the College Football Playoff Championship game. Smith's stats for 2020 were 98 receptions for 1,511 yards, 17 touchdowns. He was also selected as the first-team All-American for the 2020 season. Alabama will play Notre Dame in the College Football Playoff semifinals. They'll be playing in the Rose Bowl in Texas. Arizona will self-impose a 1-year ban from the NCAA tournament, the university announced on Tuesday, December 29th. The program has been charged with 9 NCAA infractions that were serious. Assistant coach Brooke Richardson was arrested in 2017 for a federal probe that was basketball corruption. In 2018, Arizona men's basketball was investigated for making payments for former number 1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton. Head coach Sean Miller had to set out a game and almost lost his job. The university announced that he would still be the head coach. He was also charged with lacking control of the program. Miller said on Tuesday he understands the university's decision, but he will still try to win a Pac-12 championship. Currently, the Wildcats are 8-1. And finally, former Panthers, Chargers, and Washington linebacker Thomas Davis will retire at the end of the season. He has spent 16 seasons in the NFL, a 3-time Pro Bowl, and a 3-time All-Pro. He also won the Walter Payton Man of the Year in 2014. Davis was a first-round pick by the Panthers in 2005 out of Georgia and was moved to safety to linebacker in his rookie year. His career stats are 1,216 tackles, 29 sacks, 13 interceptions, and 18 forced fumbles. More college bowl games. On our last episode of the pod, we discussed the first week of college bowl games. Well, there was more that happened, so let's dig into the highlights. The first is Hawaii versus Houston on New Mexico Bowl. The game was played on Christmas Eve. The Rainbow Warriors, which were Hawaii's mascot, are 5-4, took on the 3-5 Houston Cougars. Hawaii held on to win 28-14 thanks to 3 touchdown passes from quarterback Chevion Cordero. Cordero threw for 136 yards and was 15 of 23. Calvin Turner rushed for 60 yards on 12 attempts and also led the team in receiving. He had 4 receptions for 88 yards and 1 touchdown. For the Cougars, Clayton Tune had 216 yards passing, 20 of 38, 2 touchdown passes, but 3 costly interceptions. Mulba Carr rushed for 47 yards on 15 carries. Nathaniel Dell had 6 receptions for 112 yards and 1 TD. The 6-1 Buffalo Bulls took on the 7-2 Marshall Thundering Herd on Christmas Day. But both Buffalo and Marshall had just lost their conference championship game. Buffalo plays in the MAC and Marshall in the Conference USA. Buffalo scored the go-ahead touchdown by Kevin Mark Jr. with 1 minute left to beat Marshall 17-10 to win the Camellia Bowl. Kyle Van Treese was 16-27 for 140 yards and 1 INT. Kevin Marks Jr. rushed for 138 yards on 15 attempts and 1 TD. Giovanni Luis had 7 receptions for 61 yards. The 19th ranked Raging Cajuns of Louisiana took on the University of Texas San Antonio in the Serve Pro First Responders Bowl. Louisiana was 10-1, and their only loss came to Coastal Carolina. They were not able to play the Chanticleers in the Sun Belt Championship because of some positive tests in both programs. San Antonio finished 3rd in the Conference USA and was looking to get an upset over the Raging Cajuns, but that simply was not the case. They fought hard, but the Roadrunners fell to the Raging Cajuns 31-24. Levi Lewis was 12 of 22 for 146 yards and 2 TD passes. Elijah Mitchell led the way in rushing and receiving for Louisiana with 127 yards at the ground and 45 yards receiving. He had 1 touchdown. For the Roadrunners, Frank Harris had 208 yards passing, 13 of 21, 2 TD passes, and 1 INT. Sincere McCormick rushed for 122 yards, and Zachariah Franklin had 5 catches for 115 yards and 1 touchdown. The Lending Tree Bowl is played on Saturday, December 26th, Boxing Day. The Georgia State Panthers took on the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. Georgia State finished the season at 5-4 in the Sun Belt, while the Hilltoppers finished 5-6 in Conference USA. The game wasn't really close at all, as the Panthers won convincingly, 39-21. Cornelius Brown was 16 of 20 for 232 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 INT. Destin Coates rushed for 117 yards and 23 carries and 1 score. For the Hilltoppers, Terrell Pigrome was 17 of 33 for 108 yards and 2 picks. C.J. Jones rushed for 57 yards on 5 attempts, and 1 TD. Joshua Simon had 4 receptions for 84 yards. And last but not least, it's the FBC Mortgage Cure Bowl as the Liberty Flames took on the 12th-ranked Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina. Liberty was 9-1 and independent, and Coastal Carolina was undefeated and the co-champions of the Sun Belt Conference. They were not able to play Louisiana in the Sun Belt Championship because of positive tests within both programs. The Flames jumped out to a big lead and held on up to the Chanticleers 37-34. Malik Willis, was 19 of 29 for 220 and 2 INTs. He also led the game in rushing with 137 yards on 21 carries. DJ Stubbs had 5 receptions for 68 yards. Grayson McCall was 21 of 32 for 318 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 INT. McCall rushed for 96 yards on 15 carries and 1 TD. Javion Haley had 13 receptions for 178 yards. YouTube sensation Jake Paul will fight once again, this time versus the former MMA fighter Ben Askren on March 28th. Jake Paul is 2-0 and just knocked out former 3-time dunk contest champion Nate Robinson in 2 rounds. Askren is a former welterweight champion for Bellator and 1 champion. Paul called out Askren and he accepted. This will be Paul's first fight versus a former fighter. Even though Jake Paul still wants to fight Conor McGregor. The fight is scheduled to take place on 28th. No word yet on where the location will be or what the other cards or how the fight will go. First question I kind of thought about, will this fight end in a knockout? I think so, and I don't think Jake Paul will be the one knocking the Askren out. I think it'll be the opposite. Askren will be knocking out Jake Paul, and I don't think it's going to last long, but I simply don't see this fight ending in a non-knockout. This is clearly going to be an advantage for Ben Askren. He hasn't fought in a while. I understand that, and he's had some injuries, but I could see him knocking out Jake Paul. Why is this fight happening? Well, Jake Paul really wants to fight a former fighter, and he really wants to fight McGregor. He's not going to likely get McGregor at all, so why not just get a former fighter in Ben Askren? Ben Askren had a lot of success over there, so if he can beat him, people I think will consider him to be more of a fighter. But I don't think Jake Paul's making the smart decision. But hey, he's fighting someone at least, and he's making more money. Does Jake Paul stand a chance? I mean, there's probably some advantage because Ben Askren is getting older. He hasn't fought in a while. He's retired. Jake Paul recently fought in November. He KO'd Nate Robinson, so there's an advantage there. And it's boxing. It's not actually MMA. But, well, it could be, I guess, too. I guess somehow they could figure out a way to put MMA in there. But you never know with Jake Paul. But I do think he has some chances, but it's very slim. How many rounds does it go? I think it goes 2 or 3. I mean, if Jake Paul manages to last more than 3 rounds, I'll be shocked. I just don't think he's going to be able to last that long because he really hasn't fought a real fighter. So I could definitely see Askren winning in 3 rounds. If he can't knock him out after that, I would have some concerns. But if I'm Jake Paul, I'm just hoping I can last the whole fight without getting KO'd. And predictions for the fight. I think Askren wins in either 2 or 3 rounds and he gets a knockout. I don't think Jake Paul lands very many punches at all, and Askren just goes at him like ham. Askren is already, when he accepted the challenge, he was already pissed at Jake Paul. So it's going to be interesting, but I definitely think Askren wins this in 3 rounds by knockout at least. All righty, let's switch gears to the MLB. The San Diego Padres continue to make moves. They've acquired the 2018 AL Cy Young Award winner, Blake Snell, according to MLB insider Jeff Passan. The deal includes 4 prospects to the Rays, and San Diego acquires ace pitcher Blake Snell. The prospects are Francisco Maya, Blake Hunt, and Cole Wilcox. Snell will be most remembered for being pulled too early in the 2020 World Series. AL Manager of the Year Kevin Cash decided to take him out, and despite having a 1-0 lead over the Dodgers, they eventually lost 3-1 as reliever Nick Anderson allowed 2 runs that lost the game for Tampa. Snell is one of the best pitchers in the league, and he's left-handed. Why did Tampa trade Snell away? I think it was mostly because of money. Snell was making a decent amount, but he was making a pretty good. He was the Rays were kind of at. Well, I would say the Rays had kind of an advantage because they weren't paying him as much money as you would think someone would pay for him. But I think the Padres will eventually pay Blake Snell, and they were kind of getting a discount for Blake Snell. I don't think they wanted to pay him. Maybe they were just not happy with how Blake Snell handled getting pulled in Game 6 of the World Series. But I think it was mostly because money. I think it's a bad move by Tampa because you're getting rid of your best pitcher and clearly a top 10 or maybe even a top 5 pitcher in the league. But hey, they're trying to save money. Is this the right for this? Who wins this trade, Tampa or San Diego? I think San Diego easily wins it, and this could definitely be like what we saw with the Houston Texans and Arizona Cardinals in the NFL in the offseason. They basically traded DeAndre Hopkins for nothing. That's what Tampa's doing. Now, we haven't really seen any of these prospects, or at least not many people have. So maybe they could be better, but I just think trading away your ace pitcher who probably would have been World Series MVP if they would have won, don't think is a smart decision, but we'll see what Tampa is. They did make the World Series last year, so how good will the Padres be next year? Oh, they will be good. You thought they were good last year? Well, they're going to be even better this year. They've now got a great pitching staff. Man Machado, Fernando Tatis, they're coming back. I mean, this team definitely rivals the Dodgers, and unfortunately, they're in the NL West, so they won't. If they don't win the division, they'll have to play a 4 seed. But we're in expanded playoffs now, so anything's possible. Man, imagine this year what we're going to see when we see the Padres and Dodgers every year. I mean, that's going to be baseball tonight every week, I think. But the Padres are going to be very good. Is Snell an elite pitcher? Absolutely. I mean, the guy won an AL Cy Young Award winner or he won an AL Cy Young for a reason. He was hurt a lot this year, but he came back, played great postseason, one of the best pitchers in the postseason. He's definitely an elite pitcher, in my opinion. He could be a top 5 in the league after this season. Can the Padres go all the way next year? Oh, there's a great chance of them. The only team that I think stands in their way is the Dodgers, and that's in the division. So, unfortunately, we probably won't get to see that in the NLCS, but hey, it still gets fun to watch the Padres Dodgers. Again, I said it's going to be baseball tonight almost every week. We're probably going to see it on Fox almost every Saturday night. I can't wait, but I do think the Padres have a very good chance of making it all the way next year. All right. Let's switch gears. Oh, not switch gears. We'll stay in baseball, and San Diego makes another move. They have now acquired Yu Darvish from the Cubs. They've made another splash in free agency. This is the second big deal that the Padres have made in the last 48 hours. On Sunday night, the Padres acquired Blake Snell, and now on Monday night, they've acquired they've acquired Yu Darvish. They will also acquire Victor Carantina, the catcher. They will trade 4 prospects and Zach Davies to the Cubs. The Padres made it all the way to the second round of the MLB playoffs. They eventually lost the Dodgers, who wound up beating the Tampa Bay Rays in Game 6 of the World Series to win their first title since 1988. The deal was first reported by ESPN MLB insider Jeff Passan. Unbelievable move for the Padres. I mean, they already acquired Mike Clevenger last year in the deadline, and now they've acquired more pitching. My goodness, this Padres team, they are stacked. And no longer is it Slam Diego. It's just San Diego with good pitching and good hitting. Who won the trade? Similar to the Blake Snell situation, I think the Padres won. Again, the Cubs trading Yu Darvish away, one of their better pitchers, doesn't make much sense, but I mean, I definitely think the Padres won this trade. There's no really way to explain. They just won the trade. Why did the Cubs trade away one of their best pitchers? To be honest with you, I don't know. A lot of people are saying it's rebuilding. Some are just saying it's a whole fire sale. Some just say they don't want to pay him. And then some even said there's rumors that the Cubs will bring in someone even bigger than Yu Darvish. Not sure how that's going to work with how stingy the Cubs are. But the only way that I can think of is similar to the Rays. They didn't want to pay him, and they get more prospects and helps them down the line. That's all I can think of. I think the Cubs management a lot of times is garbage, but they were able to win the NL Central last year. So we'll see what happens, but not a good look for the Cubs. I'll say that. Are the Padres now the favorite to win the World Series, or at least in the NL? Well, as I said earlier, I think the only team stopping in their way is the Dodgers. I still think the Dodgers are a little better just because they won the World Series last year, and they even have a better lineup, and there's not as much pressure on them, and they have more experience than the Padres. So I would say they're the second favorite to win the World Series, or at least in the NL, because you also have. Well, I think they're better than the Yankees, to be honest with you. I think the Dodgers and the Padres are the two best teams in baseball right now. So I think they're the second team to win the World Series, or my projection. So unfortunately, that can't be a World Series matchup. It can't even be an NLCS matchup unless the MLB changes the postseason again. But I think they're the second team favored to win it all. Are the Cubs tanking? I would have to guess. I would say no, just because they have a few good players still left on that team. But to trade away Yu Darvish doesn't make a lot of sense. Kyle Schwarber's no longer going to be there. They still have Chris Bryant. They still have Anthony Rizzo. So I wouldn't say they're tanking, but they have a very hard chance of going back-to-back, winning the NL Central. I could see the Cardinals or Brewers taking that division, but I don't think the Cubs are tanking just yet. Who is the best pitcher for the Padres right now? Well, I think it's still Blake Snell. I mean, he did win the AL Cy Young Award. Yu Darvish has been in the running for the NL Cy Young Award winner. He's never actually won it, but he's been in the running. But yeah, Blake Snell is the best, even though that lineup is so deadly right now. And they no longer have to just worry about hitting. You have to now worry about hitting and the pitching for the Padres. So yeah, I'd say Blake Snell is the best. And is there a chance Manny Machado or Fernando Tatis, who has a better chance of getting the MVP? I'm going to say Manny Machado just because he's been in the league a little longer and he's been able to prove it more consistently. If he could, I feel like he likes San Diego. It seemed like that first year he wasn't a huge fan of it, but now the second year, I think he was rejuvenated during his second season or during the COVID-shortened season. So I think Manny Machado has a better chance of winning the MVP. However, Fernando Tatis, He's going to be a good of a player, and he'll be heck of a player, and I'm assuming he wins at least 1 or 2 MVPs before he retires. It's hard to believe already, but we're already in Week 16 of the National Football League. And the best part is there was no shutdown or late start to the season. I'll get you caught up with all the action that occurred in Week 16. Now remember, all these games with the playoff implication. So if your team is not in the playoffs and did not play a team that was going to make the postseason, they will not be included. So under further ado, let's get into the highlights. We start off in Detroit, where the 9-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Detroit to take on the 5-9 Lions, who are without their head coach or interim head coach. They fired Matt Patricia, and Darrell Bevell, the interim, had to skip the game because of COVID contact tracing. But Tampa dominated the Lions with a 47-7 win. The Lions did not stand a chance. Matt Stafford and Kenny Galladay were out, and the Lions head coach for the game was Robert Prince. Prince was a wide receivers coach and never had any coaching experience. The stats were Tom Brady was 22 of 47 for 348 yards and 4 TD passes. Keyshawn Vaughn had 62 yards on the ground, and Mike Evans had 10 receptions for 181 yards and 2 TDs. For the Lions, Chase Daniels was 13 of 18 for 86 yards. DeAndre Swift had 10 attempts for 45 yards, and Danny Amendola had 37 yards receiving. 49ers versus the Cardinals. The Cardinals are still trying to make the playoffs as the 7th seed. C.J. Beathard got the start in replace of Nick Mullins. The Niners were trying to play spoiler as they already were eliminated. The 49ers took an early lead and never looked back. They had a 7-6 lead at the end of half as C.J. Beathard found Jeff Wilson in the end zone. San Fran scored 3 TDs in the second half. Kyler Murray would throw a touchdown pass to DeAndre Hopkins in the fourth quarter, but that was it for the Cardinals. They would have a fumble, interception, and 2 punts all in the second half. The 49ers would hold on to win 20-12, and the Cardinals now find themselves out of the playoffs behind the Bears, who beat the Jags to get back into the postseason. C.J. Beathard threw 3 TD passes and was 13 of 22 for 182 yards. Folks, he could be the backup quarterback over Nick Mullins. Jeff Wilson had a great game with 22 carries for 183 yards. George Kittle came back from injury and had 4 receptions for 92 yards. Kyler Murray for the Cardinals was 31 of 50 for 247 and 1 INT. Murray also had the game in rushing for the Cardinals with 9 carries for 75 yards. Christian Kirk had 7 receptions for 76 yards. Bad news for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray did leave the game with a leg injury. There's still questions on if he could play this Sunday versus the Rams, in which if they lose, they are officially out of the playoffs. They need to win. They also have the Bears needing to lose. However, if they beat the Rams, they could take the Rams spot over the playoffs. Now we go to Vegas, where the Miami Dolphins traveled and were hoping to stay in the playoffs with the win over the Raiders. The Dolphins trailed the whole first half. Vegas led Miami 13-6 for the start of the third quarter. Tagovailoa found Myles Gaskin for a 10-yard touchdown to tie the game at 13. The Raiders would score a field goal to go up 16-13. Miami decided to replace Tagovailoa with veteran quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. Most of the action came in the fourth quarter. The Raiders got a long touchdown from Nelson Aguilar, but missed the extra point. The Dolphins would get the go-ahead touchdown as Ryan Fitzpatrick would find Myles Gaskin for 59 yards. The Raiders would get a go-ahead field goal, which they thought to go up by 2, but they gave too much time for Fitzmagic. The Raiders made a huge mistake, leaving Mike Hollins wide open, and they got flagged for putting a face mask on the former veteran quarterback from Harvard. The Dolphins would win the game on a 44-yard go-ahead field goal from Jason Saunders. Final score, the Dolphins 26, the Raiders 25. Fitzmagic led the game in passing despite only playing 1 quarter. He had 182 yards passing and 1 TD pass. Myles Gaskin rushed for 87 yards on 14 attempts and led the game in receiving as well. He had 82 yards through the air and added 2 touchdowns. For the Raiders, Derek Carr had 336 yards passing, 1 touchdown pass. Josh Jacobs had 69 yards on 13 attempts, and Nelson Aguilar had 155 yards receiving and 1 TD. Let's get to the Sunday games. The Pittsburgh Steelers hosted the Indianapolis Colts, trying to end their 3-game losing streak. If the Steelers won, they would officially clinch the AFC North. However, if they lost, they would have to play for the division against the Browns if Cleveland had won. The Colts started out fast, and the Steelers, like the last 3 games, started very slow. Indy had a 21-7 lead at the half as Phillip Rivers threw 1 touchdown and Jonathan Taylor had 2 rushing touchdowns. Pittsburgh would score after taking advantage of a Colts fumble, but here come the Steelers. They would outscore the Colts 21-3 in the second half. Big Ben would not throw one, not two, but three TD passes. The Colts couldn't answer as they would follow the Steelers 28-24. With the win, the Steelers now clinch the AFC North, and the Colts, despite a 10-5 record, are now out of the playoffs looking in. The Colts have to win next week against the Jaguars and have to have a loss from either the Dolphins, Ravens, or Browns. Roethlisberger threw for 342 yards and 3 touchdown passes. James Conner had 20 yards on 5 carries and 1 TD. Juju Smith-Schuster had 9 receptions for 96 yards and 1 receiving touchdown. Phillip Rivers was 22 of 35, 270 yards and 1 TD. He also threw 1 interception as well. Jonathan Taylor continued to have success with 18 carries on the ground, 74 yards, and 1 touchdown. Zach Pascal had 3 receptions for 64 yards and 1 touchdown. The Baltimore Ravens were trying to get their 4th straight win with the victory over the New York Giants. Somehow the Giants, who were 5-9, still had a chance of making the playoffs with a win. Baltimore was 9-5 and had a chance of getting back in the playoffs with a win, and because the Colts and Browns both lost. The Ravens would get the job done. They had an early 23 lead at halftime as Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins would both have touchdowns. The Ravens would get another touchdown in the second half as Lamar Jackson would find Dez Bryant in the end zone to go up 27-6. Bryant had his second touchdown of the season. That would be a second straight game with the receiving touchdown this year. The Giants would score to trim the game to 14 points as Daniel Jones found Sterling Shepard. However, the Giants could not answer after that, and the Ravens ended up beating the Giants 27-13. The Ravens are now back in the playoffs with the win, and both the Browns and Colts losing. Lamar Jackson was 17 of 26 for 183 yards and 2 TD passes. Gus Edwards, or Gus the Bus, had 85 yards on 15 attempts, and Mark Andrews led the way in receiving with 7 receptions for 76 yards. For the Giants, Daniel Jones was 24 of 41 for 252 yards and 1 touchdown pass. Wayne Gallman had 27 yards on the ground on 6 carries. Sterling Shepard had 6 receptions, 76 yards, and 1 TD. The Cleveland Browns traveled to the Meadowlands to take on the Jets. The Jets had just upset the Rams for their first win of the season. With the Browns, while the Browns were trying to stay in the thick of things in the AFC playoffs, they had their problems. Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, and Donovan Peoples-Jones were all out. The game started out as a nightmare for the Browns. The bottom-dwelling Jets took an early 13-3 lead at the break. To make things even worse for Cleveland fans, New York scored on a trick play that went from Jamison Crowder to the other receiver, Braxton Burrows. The Jets would score again as Sam Darnold would find Jamison Crowder to go up 23. However, the Browns made a comeback. Cleveland would get a blocked field goal on Sam Ficken, and they would get a touchdown by Kareem Hunt to trim the game to 4 points. However, Cody Parkey would miss the extra point, which was huge. Baker Mayfield ended up turning the ball over twice with 2 fumbles that sealed the Jets' second win of the season. The Jets beat the Browns 23-16. Darnold wasn't great, but he was good enough to get the win. 16 of 32 for 175 yards and 2 TD passes. Frank Gore had 48 yards on the ground on 14 attempts. Jamison Crowder had 7 receptions, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Last 2 games have been solid for Jamison Crowder. On the other side, Baker Mayfield was 28 of 53 for 285 yards and 2 fumbles. Nick Chubb had 28 yards on the ground and 1 TD. Austin Hooper led the way in receiving for the losing Browns with 7 receptions for 71 yards. The Atlanta Falcons versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Falcons hoped to play spoiler against the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Chiefs. The Chiefs needed a win to clinch home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Atlanta was able to shut down the Chiefs for most of the game. Falcons defense was able to force 2 punts and interception before they finally scored. The Falcons did end up scoring first and took a 7-0 lead in the half until the Chiefs scored late in the second half as Pat Mahomes would find Travis Kelce to tie the game at 7. In the third quarter, the Chiefs took a 10-7 lead thanks to a long field goal from Harrison Butker. The Falcons in the fourth quarter would score as Matt Ryan would found the former first-round pick Laquan Treadwell. However, as always, Patrick Mahomes comes back for the win. The 2018 League MVP and the 2020 Super Bowl MVP found Demarcus Robinson in the end zone to go up 17-14. Falcons drove down the field, but they missed the field goal to tie the game and go into overtime. The Chiefs beat the Falcons 17-14. Mahomes threw for 278 yards and 2 touchdowns. Darrell Williams had 46 yards on the ground. Travis Kelce had 7 receptions for 90 yards and 1 TD. Matt Ryan was 27 of 35 for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Calvin Ridley had 5 receptions for 130 yards. Bears versus Jags. Don't look now, but the Chicago Bears are currently in the playoffs if the season ended today. Chicago controls their own destiny with the win over the Jaguars 41-17. All the Bears have to do is beat the Packers, or the Cardinals need to lose in order for them to clinch a playoff berth. The game wasn't much of a contest as the Bears rolled past the Jags. Look on the good side, though, for Jags fans, if there are any. They'll now have the number 1 pick, which they clinched, and means they'll likely draft Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence, who many are considering the greatest prospect ever. Jacksonville did score in their first possession, but after that was all Chicago. Mitch Trubisky could be the Bears quarterback going forward. The former number 2 overall pick threw for 265 yards on 24 of 35 passing attempts and 2 touchdowns. He also threw 1 interception. David Montgomery had 23 carries for 95 yards, and Allen Robinson had 10 receptions for 103 yards. Mike Glenn, the former Bears quarterback, was the star for the Jags and threw for 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 211 yards passing. DJ Chark for the Jaguars had 4 receptions for 62 yards and 1 touchdown. The battle for one of the best divisions in all football happened on Sunday at Lumen's Field in Seattle, Washington. The Seattle Seahawks hosted their bitter rival, the LA Rams, for the NFC West title. All the Seahawks needed to do was to beat the Rams, and they would officially clinch the NFC West. The Rams needed to win both their next 2 games in order to win the NFC West and have a home playoff game. However, that would not come to fruition as the Seattle Seahawks dominated the Rams, especially in the second half. The game was tied at 6 in the first half, but here comes Russell Wilson and the Hawks. He would score a touchdown pass as he would find Jacob Hollister. He would also get a rushing touchdown. The Rams only got a field goal and would fall to Seattle 20-9. The Seahawks officially clinched the NFC West and have a home playoff game. They still have a shot for the number 1 seed if they can win and the Packers and Saints lose this Sunday. Russell Wilson was 20 of 32 for 225 yards and 1 TD pass. Chris Carson had 69 yards on the ground, and DK Metcalf had 59 yards receiving. For LA, Jared Goff, despite injuring his thumb, threw for 234 yards and 1 INT. Darrell Henderson rushed for 62 yards and 12 carries, and Cooper Kupp had 8 receptions for 86 yards. The Rams need a win on Sunday in order to officially clinch a playoff berth, or the Cardinals, well, they play the Cardinals, so they need a win to clinch a playoff berth. How about them Cowboys? With all the struggles and injuries Dallas has to deal with, they still have a chance to win the NFC Least, or the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys got a huge win over the Philadelphia Eagles, 37-17. The Cowboys needed to win this Sunday over the Giants, and the Washington football team will have to lose the Eagles on Sunday night for them to clinch the NFC East and be in the playoffs. With the loss, the Eagles are officially eliminated. Currently, Philly is 4-10-1. After the game was over, it was reported that the Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy smashed watermelons to pump the players up. Crazy stats, the Cowboys are 2-0 when McCarthy smashes watermelons. The Eagles struck first and would even have a 14-3 lead. However, the Eagles started to struggle, and the Cowboys took a 20-17 lead going into the break. In the second half, the 3-time Super Bowl champions, Dallas Cowboys, crushed their bitter rivals. Andy Dalton threw 3 TD passes, 1 interception, and 377 yards, the most this season for him. Zeke rushed for 105 yards on 19 carries, and Marcus Gallup had 6 receptions for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts got his 3rd career start and did not play his best game. He was 21 of 39 for 342 yards, 1 TD, and 2 interceptions. He also led the team in rushing with 69 yards. Deshaun Jackson had 1 catch for 81 yards and 1 touchdown. Final score, the Cowboys defeated the Eagles 37-17. Titans versus Packers. The Green Bay Packers host the Tennessee Titans on Sunday Night Football looking for their 12th win of the season. The Packers have already clinched the NFC North and were looking to get closer to clinching the top overall spot in the NFC. The Tennessee Titans have not clinched a playoff berth but had the 4th seed in the AFC playoffs and were looking to upset the Packers in the frozen tundra. Green Bay looked like the real deal on Sunday night. They jumped out to a 19-0 lead and forced 2 interceptions from Ryan Tannehill. The game was snowing for the entire contest, and the Titans never really got close to the Pack. The Packers would win 40-14, only need 1 more win to officially be the top seed in the NFC playoffs. They would have home field advantage if they take care of business against the Bears this Sunday. Aaron Rodgers, who many are considering the favorite to win the league MVP, had 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, threw for 231 yards, and was 21 of 25. A.J. Dillon came in the game for an injured Aaron Jones and rushed for 124 yards. He also picked up 2 touchdowns in the process. Devonta Adams had 11 receptions, 142 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill struggled the entire game and only threw 121 yards on 11 of 24 passing, one touchdown and two interceptions, excuse me. Derrick Henry had 98 yards on the ground, and A.J. Brown had 4 receptions for 43 yards. Bills versus the Patriots, the grand finale on Monday Night Football for the 2020 NFL season. The Bills were trying to be trying to beat the Patriots or trying to sweep the Patriots for the first time since 1999. In 1999, Belichick wasn't even the coach, and Brady was still in college at the time. But the Bills would do it, and they would dominate the Patriots with a commanding 38-9 win. Buffalo won the AFC East last week for the first time since 1995. The Pats would score on their first possession, but that was the only time they led. The newly crowned AFC East champs had a 10-9 lead in the second quarter, but here comes Josh Allen and the Bills. Allen threw 2 more touchdowns in the second quarter to go up 24-9 at the end of the first half. He threw 2 more touchdown passes in the second half, both to Stephon Diggs. Cam Newton struggled and was benched in favor of Jarrett Stidham. The Bills would beat the Patriots 38-9. Josh Allen threw for 320 yards, was 27 of 36, and 4 TD passes. Puts himself back in the MVP conversation, in my opinion. Zach Moss rushed for 57 yards on 12 carries and 1 TD. Stephon Diggs had 9 receptions, 145 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Jarrett Stidham surprisingly threw for more yards than Cam Newton did. He only played a quarter and a half and threw for 44 yards on 4 completions. Sony Michel rushed for 69 yards, and Jacoby Myers had 4 receptions for 45 yards. Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. We release new episodes every Wednesday and Friday. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the left. If you want to subscribe to the channel, click on the right.